Welcome to the CS Leadership Roundtable, your monthly forum for actionable insights across customer success, support, and service. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder and chief customer officer of Success Hacker and chief product officer for our success coaching program. This learning series is brought to you by Success Coaching, where we've trained over 40,000 professionals across 96 countries. Whether you're focused on customer success, technical support, or frontline service, our programs are designed to help your team deliver exceptional customer experiences. And you can find all the details of our offering on our website, successcoaching.co, or in the chat where Ashley has just provided some links and coupon codes that we're offering, including a new coupon code for our 12-week coaching cohort that I lead through the University of San Francisco. That's a great program, one of my favorite products that we have. Today's topic is on revenue ownership and how CS leaders can use it as a ticket out of the corporate kids table. I couldn't think of a better way to lay that out. A few quick housekeeping notes. This session is being recorded and will be available next week with a transcript on our website. Use the Q&A button for questions. Higher upvoted questions get priority. Keep the chat and commentary to the chat window, please. And LinkedIn Live viewers can post questions directly in the comments, which will be relayed to us. Thank you, Santana, for monitoring that. What sets our roundtable apart is our focus on real-world applications. We bring together industry experts who share practical insights that you can implement regardless of your company size or your customer engagement model. Three outstanding leaders join us in the field. Well, two outstanding leaders and one that's just kind of meh. And I'm going to let them introduce themselves to y'all and have them talk a little bit about themselves before we get started. Let's begin introductions in alphabetical order as usual with Kristi.
Oh, look at that. I actually didn't even realize I was first in this alphabetical order. Well, Andrew, thanks for having me back. Kristi Faltorusso, currently Chief Customer Officer at Client Success. We are a customer success management solution. I have spent the past 13 years building, scaling, and transforming customer success teams and B2B hypergrowth SaaS companies, and I am excited for today's conversation.
Thanks, Kristi. I'm excited to have you here. And once again, thank you for hosting the CS Mastermind on my behalf next week. And if any of you leaders or individual contributors are available to join us, you should join that event, because I'm sure Kristi's going to knock it out of the park. So no pressure, Kristi. Next up is my co-founder, friend, longtime colleague, Todd Eby. Todd and I go back way too long than either of us would care to admit. So Todd, why don't you introduce yourselves to everybody else, because nobody really sees you much. They just hear from you every once in a while.
Well, I don't know what else is left to say. I don't have a practiced introduction like Kristi. That was impressive.
It's not practice. It's just when you say it as many times as I've had to say it, Todd, it's like...
Well, saying it many times is practice.
It's practice.
Like you sit in front of a mirror and practice it all the time.
I don't know. It's kind of what you were insinuating.
I don't think so. That wasn't my intent. Love you. So Todd Eby, as Andrew mentioned, co-founder of Success Hacker and Success Coaching. Only other thing to add is I'm also the co-director of the USF MBA program, which is the program that Andrew was speaking about in terms of the materials that come out of the Executive Education Center. So I also help out with that program. But that's it for me. I'm going to pass it over to Ty.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. And last but not least, Ty.
Hey, everyone. Ty Raia here. Currently, I oversee customer success at Nozomi Networks, which is a cybersecurity company, and I oversee that for the Americas. Background-wise, I'm really a big fan, particularly of startups that are late stage, moving into that hypergrowth phase. That is kind of my sweet spot and where I like to spend most of my time, because I think there's a lot of really fun challenges and puzzles to solve.
Awesome. Thanks, Ty. And thanks again for being here. And thank you all for making the time. Now that we got those details covered, let's dive into today's topic. In the corporate world, those who own the numbers own the power. While customer success teams have traditionally been seen as relationship builders and problem solvers, this perception has actually limited our ability to influence strategic decisions. By not aggressively claiming ownership of revenue metrics, we've effectively volunteered to remain in a supporting role at the corporate kids table. It's time to acknowledge that in business, influence follows the money, and those who don't own revenue are choosing to be powerless. Now, to get things started in your experience, leading customer success teams, what was that pivotal moment when you realized that relationship building alone wasn't enough to drive strategic influence in your organization?
I mean, I'll kick it off with when I realized I had no control over my own budget and I had to go beg people for things that I needed to actually move things forward. I think that was a big wake-up call for me.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what happens when you get budget. When you
don't.
What happens when you drive revenue and what it can do, how much budget you can get, for sure. Sorry, Kristi, do you have something to add?
I always have something to add.
Of course you do.
My big aha moment, because my first role in customer success was in an organization where customer success did not own any revenue. Okay, we worked alongside an account management org, and the account management org rolled up into the CRO. So we didn't even have an account management team that was part of the CX team. And so my first realization that this was a model that may not sustain my success long-term was being in a board meeting and getting 3 minutes of airtime. Now, I might be exaggerating that, but nobody cared what we had to say. The entire focus was on the revenue team, was on the marketing team, was on the product team. And feeling so deprioritized by our investors clearly sent a signal to us that we were not a priority to the organization. Couldn't figure out why until I had some deeper conversations there. Realized very fast that if we were not tied to revenue, that would continue to be the experience we'd all have.
Oh yeah, they viewed you as a cost center.
Yeah, of course.
That's all you were. There's a cost center.
And it also, it kind of goes hand in hand, and maybe without saying, but if you want to retain your headcount, if you want to get more, you got to have the budget. You've got to prove your ROI. You can't contribute the revenue. How are you going to prove your ROI? Because let's face it, like the folks that are in charge of a company, one of the things that I always learned is you have to be brief. You have to give it to them very, very quickly in simple terms that they can immediately go, gotcha. And if you can't say, we added X amount of revenue and I need to get Y number of headcounts so that I can add Z amount more of revenue, your headcount is something you get to arm wrestle with the CFO over, and they're generally going to.
Yeah, we had worked alongside a professional services team where they sold services. And so because it was part of the customer success team or the organization, CX org, and they were driving revenue, it was so easy for professional services to continue to get heads. We didn't. But then when we tried to tie our success back to retention and growth, they almost directly correlated it back to the professional services team as almost as if we weren't even there. Because it was easy to correlate the impact of the work that the actual services team was doing. How could customer success possibly be driving that as the outcome? Services is doing all the heavy lifting. It's clear. We make an investment. It's an input-output model. Made perfect sense to everybody. We got no credit for anything we did anyway.
And you were not going to let that slide, were you?
You know me. I am here for the credit.
Oh, no, you don't.
I am here for the credit. I need a head pat. I need recognition. And I need compensation.
So how did your team's influence within the organization change once you began actively kind of surfacing that, tracking and reporting on the revenue metrics and the specific metrics, and then which metrics were the most impactful?
NRR expansion, I would say, are the most impactful for me. Though I do make the argument that I don't like CSMs, like individual contributors, to carry a high quota. And I'm throwing this in early because, let's stir the pot. Though I think leadership should. I think if you have good strategy, right, then you don't have to put that pressure on CSMs. And I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot of studies that prove why putting heavy quotes on individual contributors, particularly in the CS role, can actually lead to a downfall. And I think if you have a strategy that says otherwise, then put your money where your mouth is, right? As a leader, and own that.
Well, I agree with you on that because I mean incentive drive behavior, right? And
Agreed.
so right, we have to and even there is some truth in that we are the relationship builders, right? And achieving trusted advisor status in the customer success world is really important. You want your customers to believe the value that they've achieved coming out of your mouth, and then the additional value that you're going to help them achieve, and you get that through trust, and that it's a really fine balance, right? Yep. But as a leader, I think a leader needs to, once again, back to the original statement, the leader needs to own that revenue, and then how you deploy, how you implement that, right? To your point, you got to maintain that balance, right? What do you got to add?
So I have so many things to say. Okay, so let me go back to your original question was like, how did I drive that change? I'll be very honest with you. That organization I was at, I was there for 5.5 years. By the time I left, we still didn't own revenue. That never changed while I was there. They did not believe that the model for them was that customer success would own revenue. They had the account management team own it. There was no change while I was there. Now, I do want to go back, Ty, to your point there, because I think it's interesting. Where I see organizations get this wrong around quotas and targets and all that. And like, again, I'm going to kind of use it interchangeably because I know that they effectively seemingly a little bit different. But the challenge that I see a lot of organizations face is that those numbers are driven top down without any input from customer success. There is no analysis done to actually understand what is the actual like earnings that you can drive from that book. Like, what does the growth opportunity look like to then set the target? So you set unrealistic targets, and then you're incentivizing and holding these folks accountable to that. So of course you're going to drive unhealthy and unnatural behaviors in the book. And I feel like that is the motion that people feel really uncomfortable with, is that you want me to go and push and push and push and sell because I have to hit this target, but I didn't have the pool to draw from, right? So for example, if I'm working with enterprise customers and I've got 4 products and 80% of my customers have all 4 products, and you're telling me I have to grow X, which would require me to sell into 100% of my book to hit that number, and it's not possible. The pool isn't there. That is the problem, right? So it's the behaviors that these targets are setting that are driving in the book, because we're not collaborating and doing that together, that work. And I do believe that the numbers are being set for us, and customer success leaders aren't going back to go have that collaboration and that conversation with the CFO, with the CEO. I don't see enough of that proactive dialogue happening. It's like, oh, okay, that's my number. Okay. And then they're taking that and then they're pushing it on their teams. And then that's where a lot of that bad traction is happening. That's where I see some of that.
I don't know. Whenever I've owned a number, I've been part of the decision-making process.
Good.
I've been
Andrew,
part of that.
Of course you would. I'm just saying, today's leadership, I'm telling you, I have conversations with folks and I ask them, if you're so uncomfortable with the target, then why was that the target you set? And they say that was the target set for me. And I said, well, that's where you got it wrong.
Right.
Yeah. I think the key thing, so the key thing first to understand is, as a customer success leader, executive, you have agency. You don't have to accept the things that are given to you without any sort of discussion around the logic and the way that you were, or the way the number was arrived at. I mean, if you do that, don't look at it and try and understand why the number is what it is. Well, wow, you just gave up all your agency. You are now beholden to that number, however you're going to make it happen. And sometimes, and I've been a victim of this in the past, completely, like, there's no logic attached to it. It's just pulled out of thin air, or it's just a hope. And we all know hope is not a strategy.
Todd, let me see. Have you seen this? Because what I'm seeing happen is that the business as a whole has a number. They can map back sales contributions to that number almost easily, right? Because I feel like when you get to a place of maturity, your sales pipeline and the average deal size and time to close, all those things become a formula, right? So they can almost anticipate that if we hit our sales target, it'll bring in X. There's this other gap of revenue that needs to be accounted for. And it's like, okay, well, whatever's left, we're going to put that on the install base. And that's now the number that the customer success team is going to hit. And there is no rhyme or reason, right? It is the piece of the pie that we're left with. And if we're not having that dialogue, to your point, we lose that agency. We now own that. And we also own the failure that's going to result from that.
Yeah, it should be good. It should go the other way. Here's as much as we realistically think we can extract. Now, sales team, you got to make up the gap.
Right. I don't have an infinite pipeline. They do. They have a pipeline. I don't have it. Exactly. I have a base, and my base is this big. That's it.
You have exactly. You have a limited TAM.
I can't kill more than I got.
Yeah. So wait a minute. So number one thing I talked about is agency. Number two thing is you need to understand the model that drives the business. So the thing that everybody needs to understand is sales just doesn't happen by picking numbers out of thin air. It's very, very regimented. If you are working at a company that has a demand gen team or a good marketing team, they are responsible for numbers. That translates into MQLs, which then become sales accepted leads, which then become sales qualified leads, which then become conversions. So the one thing that everybody needs to understand is everything upstream is attributed to this model. And then there's a concept of a unit of growth that is attributed to that. So sales knows if I have a conversion rate of X, I can back into how many people I need based on how many SQLs I'm getting, and I can predict what my revenue is going to be. Accuracy, kind of debatable, but once you get to be pretty mature, it's fairly spot on. The problem that customer success has is, by and large, most people don't buy into this concept of we are actually part of that then model. We need to look at, okay, if that is in place and the number is this, how much of that model is going to contribute to this target? What's left over? And how am I going to do that? And then we need to have the same sort of modular concept of a unit of growth. We need to know that given X type of customer, we can generate Y amount of expansion. If they look like this, we can renew them at X percentage so that we can get back to a point where we have a conversation that is anchored in data, because the only way that you are not going to have to beg and scrabble and bring out the tin cup for your budget is if A, you're delivering so much revenue that nobody can argue with it, just period, full stop, or B, you can point to this model that the front end, the CFO is already completely bought into because it's standard. And you just say, look, it follows the same lines. Here's what it looks like post-sales. Like, pull the model apart. I don't care if you want to change it a little bit, great, but here's the model. And it says we need this many people to accomplish this thing that you've laid out. And if you can do that, then you've got the second thing in place. The third thing is, and I'll go back to like what Ty said, I kind of differ in that I think if you are going to be responsible for contributing a number, make it attributable. Make the ROI of your organization irrefutable. Like, take a number, associate it to your people. Don't just take it yourself, because then you're the one that's hosed if they can't make it happen. Attribute it to the people and incent the behavior. It is just like every other organization that you want something to happen, pay for it. And I mean, let's face it, like CS is not that much. I mean, everybody's going to hate this comment, but it's not that much different than sales. We build trust. We build 100%. A relationship. We advise. Good salespeople, and I'm not talking boiler room. I'm not talking, like timeshares. Good salespeople build trust. They show value. they don't just get you to sign through some sort of Jedi mind trick. Like, it's the same thing that a really good customer success person does. You don't actually have to sell. You just have to put in front of them a solution to their problem or a way to address their needs. It all comes down to, if you can deliver value and it is in line with what they need, they're going to basically either make the choice to stay with status quo, knowing that things are burning down around them, or they're going to move forward and solve their challenge. And it's not any different. I mean, it's what a good customer success person tries to do every day.
You're always selling. You're always selling. And actually, you're selling from a point of strength when you are selling based off of the value, right? The salespeople, they got the tougher job. They got to bring customers in, and they've got to convince them to do business with your company based off of what other customers' successes are.
They have to convince
in this case, you've actually demonstrated that you can provide value within that customer's four walls. So you're now saying, hey, I got more value for you.
Well, I would argue that the way that most people are compensated for their incentive is completely wrong. I would say that if you focus on knowing what values you can deliver, and you basically focus on, did you deliver that value in this situation? So completely value-based, like, did they get this? Did you hit the measures that you sold them on? They bought because it was going to give them X uplift in whatever thing. I mean, it's what we all do when we're selling, when we're doing customer success. Doesn't matter, right? Like, you define what value is to the customer, what you can deliver, and if you deliver it, then it's basically binary, yes or no, right? And so if we did compensation based primarily on that, and then you trickled it down to, did you hit your number? Did you do this? But most companies aren't going to do that.
So what do you think about that, Ty? I'm sorry, go ahead.
These organizations are not mature enough, though, because Todd, what you described, yes, that's the ideal state. And when you say it so eloquently as you did, it makes perfect sense. And it's you can't deny it as a model. The problem is, I would almost go out as far to say 90% of people in customer success organizations don't have the data to support that model. They haven't built it yet. So they don't know if they have the right inputs to say A plus B equals C. And so for them to have to go back and have that conversation and justify where they should be pulling these levers, they can't do it.
Well, that's why we are where we are today, right? Like,
well, listen, I always say, every time a CS leader fails, an angel gets its wings, right? Like, it's another organization that will never be funded again. Because every time we fail to hit these targets, that's our reality, right? We've proven that the model for customer success doesn't work. And then there's this disbelief that we can actually ever do this thing.
Well, but that's like a fundamental, like, trap in thinking. It's a fallacy, right? So ultimately, if you are in this position where you are getting, or you're having the conversation, I love this one, like, I'm getting bad deals, I'm getting bad fit customers. Well, ultimately, you have to look at why that's happening. And if it's because you can't define, and I'll just go back to, like, value as the simplest way of explaining, like, if you can't define the value that your product delivers, that is for each type of scenario, then you're never going to hit it. Like, even if you only get the gross scenarios, it's kind of like functionality, right? Like, map functionality to it, look at how customers use it, and say, this is for this type of customer, what is valuable. And if you're not doing that, and you're in this position where you're just having, like, sales selling shit, and you can't actually ever deliver it, then you're always going to be in that position, right?
Oh, Todd, I can't tell you. And Ty, you could probably agree with this, but if I asked 100 CSMs, 99 of them are going to tell me they could not clearly articulate how their customers are defining value. They cannot. And I don't, and you listen, I think it goes back to why people buy. People are buying products without having a clear understanding of that coming into it. Then CSMs aren't equipped to helping them define it. I mean, it's like, this problem starts so early
It
I
totally
listen.
does.
I'm not playing a victim, and I'm not making excuses, Todd. So before you say anything, I see where you're looking at me a little salty. I'm just telling you.
Ty's been sitting.
This is
all right,
where I
it's all right.
just feel like
I'll jump
that's
in.
a big problem here. That's also kind of just taking that a little bit further back.
One thing, I'm going to turn it over to Ty. Give me 1 second, Ty.
Sure,
I
Todd,
promise.
go ahead.
So this is, it goes back to the name, right? Like, how do you know that you accomplished customer success if you don't know what the hell success looks like? If you can't go Beyonce and say, put a number on it, then what the hell are you doing?
Like, did you drop a Beyonce reference in our webinar? Did you really?
I went there.
You went to Beyonce.
He tried to be cute with my angel gets its wings. Like, he wanted to have his own little thing. Yeah.
Good job, cowboy.
I can't pull off the angel. I'd like I'd be like a pull off the wings of a fly reference. But
okay, all right. Let's thank you for the Beyonce.
If you can't hit on what success looks like, if you can't put a number to it, then like, what the hell are you doing? Like, success planning 101. What does success look like? How do I get there?
I'm not buying that people are buying without understanding what the return on their investment is. So I'm not buying that. I can buy more that it's not being communicated and that customer success managers are having a hard time getting that information.
Articulating it and getting it to a SMART goal where it is measurable, I think is tough for folks, Andrew. I think that they know the problem they're solving for. Being able to say specifically, this is how I'm going to measure it, while it's time, revenue, savings, tied to your point where we're preventing something. I think people get stuck on that.
Well, I think they also get stuck on.
Wait.
Go, Ty.
I think there's two different things happening here, right? Like, sales, no offense to sales folks, are really more focused on short-term gains. Customer success is more focused on long-term success. Being able to get the data for both of those come in different waves. And I think because executives more often come from the sales side, they expect that very quick turnaround for what those numbers should look like. And getting good data for customer success is more of a long game. And I think there's an impatience with doing it correctly, right? Like, a lot of what we have to do is reverse engineer. And reverse engineering in a sales cycle, much shorter. Reverse engineering in a good customer success cycle, so saturating a customer, takes a long time. And I just think there's a lot of impatience around being able to do that. So we work with like these half-assed numbers, excuse my language, in order to get there and kind of as a stopgap to say, this is what the true number should look like. We're impatient to get to that often, I find.
Ty, do you find that organizations, in conversations that you're having, have a very clear understanding of what the leading indicators are, like clear milestones that are measurable in the journey, instead of saying, we're waiting for NRR, we're waiting for renewals, we're waiting for these things? Because those lagging indicators, they will kill us. That will be our death if that is all we have to measure. And if you're in an organization that has 3-5-year renewals, contract term length, there is no way you can wait that long to prove value.
Yeah, you need to find a bunch of other things to reverse engineer more quickly, right? Like, when I first started in Nozomi, the first thing I did is met with a handful of our absolute best customers and reverse engineered what that customer journey looks like, what those markers look like. So I at least have something to start banking off of. This is what I can expect. This is what I can aim for. This is, how I can get X customer to this place, right? But yeah, it takes a little bit longer to do this.
Well, and this is how you can become very predictive about their success and therefore that renewal and that revenue that you're willing to own.
Yeah.
One thing, like, you are absolutely spot on. And I think a lot of folks struggle to reverse engineer, and you end up with, BS numbers. And, we all know, like, we're trying to find a way to prove a proof that we need to prove. So you're like so spot on with CS as a long game, and most people don't get it. And so what I would say,
I say it all the time, though. I say it all the time. We're playing a long game, 100%.
Well, and I try and explain it to folks in a way that maybe will resonate with like some of the folks on the call. But it's, if you want a good way of thinking about it and explaining it in a way that leadership can understand, and that you can get somebody else at the table to jump on, explain it like keywords, long tail keywords in SEO. SEO doesn't work overnight, but it is the lifeblood of the marketing folks. And customer success is the same way. Like, you don't get a renewal overnight. It takes months and months and months, obviously, right? Like, there's a cycle. So if you start thinking about it that way and you look for like, okay, how do they attribute this? Like, what are the leading indicators? What am I seeing? Like, try and draw analogies and parallels between concepts that are readily accessible to the folks that you're talking to, but also like use that at your core to like figure out a model. If you don't have one, like look for something else that's long tail that you can wrap your head around and then go forward with that. I mean, I could explain to you how to build an entire model, but we don't have time for that. So, that's my
In human
like,
terms,
No,
I
and
tend
we
to
want to
use
keep people awake. We want to keep people awake during the webinar, not put them to sleep. Okay.
I tend to use a relationship model for people kind of outside of it, right? Like sales gets me to the proposal of the relationship, right? Customer success is that long-term lifetime marriage, right? Like it's just a different skill set that's required. And it's not a short-term way of thinking about things, right? At least that's how I like to look at it.
Well, and this is where I think that balance between driving revenue, maintaining the relationship is actually I think it's an important balance, but I think it's a good thing. I really think having that relationship, it helps you drive that revenue. I mean, when I was
100%.
back in my days at Business Objects, the strongest relationships I had were with my top 5 accounts that made up 60% of my book of business. And I could literally pick up the phone when we were short. My GM would call me and say, "Hey, Marks, can you help me? We need to uncover another $100,000 for this quarter, the last week of the quarter." And I'm picking up the phone, calling one of those 5 and saying, "Hey, can you sign a PO for $100,000 in services? We're gonna spend it," because they trusted me. That was that kind of relationship, and I was paid on that revenue, and they knew that, right? But I leveraged that relationship to my benefit.
Yeah, well, and that's what every good. I'm not even going to use like an S word. I think every good person who's responsible for a long-term relationship that has a commercial component does. Full stop.
Can we say something also? There's a level of transparency that is required for that to be a reality. Okay. One of the things that I do early on in the partnership is let's all get on the same page. We are in a commercial relationship. Okay. You signed a contract and that's why we're working together. This is not charity work here. If you get the value that you paid for, then you stay. And my job is to help you find new use cases to grow. If I'm clear on my role and you understand that, then under no circumstances should it ever feel icky. If I'm doing the job that I said I would do by helping you get the value you paid for and asked you to continue to pay for that value, and hey, I've got more value you can buy, then there is nothing wrong with that. We also need to stop running, like, listen, this whole like, oh, sales is gross, you can't do both. I was the CSM on Oracle. Let me tell you, I sold more product to Oracle than anybody else sold to anybody in their customer base as a CSM. And when I was promoted to a leadership role, Oracle went to our CEO and said, if you take Kristi off my account, I will churn and go to your competitor. Okay, so do not tell me you cannot be a trusted advisor and sell product. It can happen. You have to be thoughtful about it.
I think
that's also because you had compromising photos of your key stakeholders, right?
Well, always that's the case. You get something that you can use later when you need it.
Yes.
So I think we all have anecdotal information about I can do sales and CS well, but behavioral science does not back that up. Like, has anyone ever looked at like behavioral like trust studies? Well, overwhelmingly, anytime you put revenue in there, people trust less. Like that, the science backs that up overwhelmingly. I know TSIA did a study back in, I think it was 2022, right? Todd's laughing. I don't. Do you want to?
So I'd love to have like a rundown on the behavioral science. I mean, behavioral economics is one of the things I love. I mean, and it comes down to like people gonna people. And any sample size, like you can make a study, say whatever the hell you want, but ultimately, like I think Kristi hit it on the head, is we are in a commercial relationship. This is not Gossip Girl. This is
Gossip
you.
Girl. Beyonce and Gossip Girl.
It's to chase Beyonce. He had to follow it up with something.
Again, we can
Beyonce
both
and
give
Gossip
anecdotal
Girl.
information on both sides of it, right? And I'm not going to argue that leadership shouldn't own revenue and shouldn't own the numbers. Not what I'm saying. But I do think it makes a difference with ICs. As much as Kristi has her story of I'm the salesperson, they know I'm a salesperson in that CS role, moving that company forward. I just told you guys the story when we talked earlier about a huge account that I had where I was talking about an expanded service that I thought would be really useful for them, and their comment was, yeah, because it affects your paycheck. It's like, no, it doesn't at all, right?
Well, but that's like that's a bias.
I'm saying any anecdotal information is bias, right? It's an N of one. We all have a story. But if we look at the research, what it says is people, when they know that you have a self-interest, your paycheck, invested in it, regardless if it's true or not, they trust you less. That is just what the science says.
But Ty, what does the science say if it's mutually beneficial? Because if I win and you win, the dynamic of that is shifted.
Sure.
So if my customer is actually getting something, so I could see the science justifying that if only I win. If this is only self-serving for me.
Totally
but if
agree.
my customer is getting something in return, does that change the dynamic? Does the study tell me something different? That's what I would challenge.
So let's look at, again, like I was trying to mention earlier, TSIA, right? Who I think most people know. Like they did one with CS orgs and they found, I think it was, they just looked at when people did adoption versus not focusing on quotas in those orgs and they separated it out, their NRR was comparatively higher. So the results show when we separate out quotas in CS, we do get higher NRR. So that's specifically looking where both parties are benefiting versus economic trust stuff, which is more behavioral science, right?
But technically, that whole economic, I get paid by my company. Whether I have a commission component or not, I'm getting paid by my company to help you get value and to keep you as a customer.
I mean, you guys don't have to like my answer. I'm just saying that's what the science says, man.
No, and I'm just saying, though, that's
Ty, this is still a safe place. I'm not trying to pile on
you, Ty.
You could still be safe here.
Yeah.
Yes, this is a safe place, Ty.
Not going to make the argument that leadership shouldn't. So
how do we? It's not a safe place. You know it's not a safe place. We established that before we let everybody in the room. So yes, Todd. Before we jump to questions, Todd, I'm sorry, Kristi, what do you have?
No, Todd, I'm the guest. I'm going first. You wait.
Yeah.
That's what Ty should have said when you didn't be quiet before. But he's too much of a gentleman. But I'll say what he was thinking.
There's the Long Island.
Can we talk about the skills to do this? I feel like there's a lot of pushback from CSMs who don't want to do sales, but I also feel like organizations, and I won't even say just leaders, we are not enabling these teams to know how to do this well, right? So aren't you going to be a bit risk adverse when there's something you don't know how to do? It's uncomfortable, and now you're being told you have to do something. Nobody is enabling you. Nobody is training you. They're not giving you the tools, but they're telling you have to do something. I'm telling you, I think that is also driving the behavior that we're seeing in a lot of these organizations as well. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but as people that sell education, you should be on board with my statement and support me 100%.
We actually do. I just finished last month value-based selling courses, and we're rolling out a value-based selling workshop. So we're on
value-based selling. Yeah. That's something I can always.
Because guess what? I don't want to go skiing because I'm scared to go skiing because I don't know how to ski. But if I learn how to ski, I might love it.
We're seeing like 90% of the organizations say, I don't have the skills to do that. It's never been asked of me, but now I'm responsible for it. What the hell do I do? And yeah, that's very fair. I think that, prior to the call, I was talking about, some pull quotes, and it was always really hilarious for me to look at leaders that are saying, like, when I'm looking at people, I'm looking at their potential and not the skills that they have. And it was like, wow, like hiring that way may be a challenge that's gonna come back to bite you, but like also taking on any sort of responsibility for a number like this, you've got to have the skills and you've got to have people that are comfortable doing it, because otherwise it's not going to work. It's going to be really clumsy.
I think we can all agree that regardless of what strategy you have around comping out IC roles, that CSMs do need to be able to do both, should be able to carry both. Neither of these should be a challenge to them. It's just a strategy, right? Is that fair?
I think we can all say we're in violent agreement, Ty.
Yes, 100%.
Why is that
Let's take some questions.
It's Todd.
Can you guys take a look at the questions you see in the Q&A window? And if any of you guys want to jump in first on any of these, hit that answer live button. Folks, if you want to upvote, right? Upvote those questions. Look in that Q&A window. Use that upvote function, and we'll answer those questions first because we go based off of most upvotes. So once again, to my guests, if you see a particular question there you want to jump in on first, hit that answer live button.
I'm just going to start from like the first one from John. Can I?
All right. So first question. Now we're going based off of most upvotes. So use the little pull down. There's a little pull down window. I know, Todd, you're in the background. You never go to these things, but you use that little pull down.
Well, it looks like John is the most upvoted. So I think Todd.
Oh, John is the most upvoted. Okay. So John.
Thank you for being,
John, thank you for joining us. John asks, how do you navigate the balance between driving revenue through upselling and cross-selling while ensuring that the primary focus remains on delivering value and success to the customer?
Patronize me, will you?
Todd?
Good journey
You
mapping.
want to jump in on this?
So it comes back to what we were talking about is you have to understand what their needs are, what is driving their success, not your company's success, their success. Like, what if they don't do X, what's going to happen? Like, what is the status quo? Where are their pain points? And if you understand that, and you should, because you shouldn't be recommending jack to them if you don't know that they need it and why they need it and how it's going to benefit them, then you've got that dialed in. And now I know, like, a lot of companies out there don't even know the value that their product delivers. They just throw it and hope it sticks. So that, that's incumbent on you. You're an army of one, right? Like,
it's mind-boggling to me. Totally mind-boggling. Kristi, what do you got to add?
Everything. Okay, so I'm going to pull out my cup to say it depends on this one, because let me tell you something. I have worked in large organizations where we're selling enterprise software. And in those cases, if we were doing cross-selling, yeah, I know exactly. If we were cross-selling, we're basically, it's a new sales motion to a different BU that is a different buyer, a different budget, a different use case. And in those cases where it is almost effectively, and not almost, it is effectively a new sale, we have actually not had the CSMs run that, because it is a completely different motion, and that takes your focus away. So John, to your point here of like, how do you keep the balance? What we would do is have our CSMs continue to focus on selling in the instances that it would continue to feed the value for the primary use case and was additive. It could be a parallel use case. It could be even additional users and stakeholders of that current subset. But the minute we were selling to a new buyer, new budget, new use case, it was a new sale. Now, that doesn't mean that sale, if it closed, wouldn't come back to me as the CSM, but the commercial motion to have that done, we actually did have a different team manage that.
Okay, so I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that these things are nuanced is kind of my like.
Agreed, and curious if any of you, particularly in enterprise, right, where things just get really complicated and everyone wants a piece of these giant pies, right? Have you ever used a motion more like spiffs? Like, it's something that I've done. I think it keeps it cleaner. It keeps sales from being cranky, right? Is that something that
they get paid on? They get paid on CSQLs that convert.
I have done a beautiful job with spiffs, and it's like you don't even get the spiff for just the lead. The spiff is worth X amount. You get a percentage, a smaller percentage on the qualified lead, and then you get the bigger percentage if it closes, right? And the percentage on the back end could be a percentage of the total value of the contract. It could be average deal size in this segment are X, so this is valued at Y. So I think there are a lot of creative ways that you can incentivize that type of behavior to still drive the same objective.
And that
And I think an
CSM is
enterprise that
also
helps a lot.
incented to work with because of that. I like that. The CSM is incented to work with the sales team and help them because they're getting something out of it as well.
Back to Todd's, to drive that behavior that we ultimately want, right?
Right.
And it's the model. I mean, it goes back to the model. Your job as a leader is to figure out the game that you're playing. Like I saw somebody did hashtag algorithm. Yeah, but it goes back to game theory, right? Like you have to figure out the game that you're playing, and you have to understand the constraints and the actors. And once you figure out the game, it's incumbent upon you to figure out how to win. Do not play this. Do not act as a leader when you're in a spot where you have to deliver. Don't play the game to not lose. Play to win. Like there's a great game on strategy, or a great book on strategy and tennis that I love, and it's playing to win. And it's the key thing is the difference between a professional and an amateur is an amateur plays to not lose, and the professionals play to win. You're a professional. Like play to win. You've got to game that system. Kristi just gave you like a cheat code that is bar none, like one of the things that I love. Figure out how to nail it for the minimal amount of work that you can do, and then expand on it and give more and more and more as you drive it in. I mean, it all comes down to there are a million ways to slice this pie, but figure out the one that works for you. There is no one solution.
Todd, and listen, I worked at 5 companies. All 5 of these companies, we had different revenue ownership models. Not one of those was the same as another. Some I didn't own renewals. I didn't own cross-sell. I didn't own upsell. I owned expansion. Others I owned renewals, not any of the growth. I owned the growth, not the renewal. So it's like, don't think that owning revenue means X. It means whatever you define it to mean in your business to mirror the objectives of the organization. So I think this is something else, is like, as a leader, you have creative liberty to design what works best for your people based on skill and will. We do not talk about that enough. It is the skill and will of the team that you have designed. Do not task your people with doing something that you've not empowered them to do. They don't have the skills to do. Now, if they need to do this eventually, you might need to think about a redesign here, right? Maybe it's different people, it's supplemental people, whatever. But you have a team assembled in front of you. You have an objective. It is your job as a leader to figure out how to achieve it.
And just to tack on to the not skills, to add on to not having the skills, also not having the metrics to accurately track those things. Don't make people accountable to things that you can't accurately track and show them the math, right?
Well,
I think
it goes back to the model, though, right? Like your model has to show direct attribution, and it has to be just dumb simple, right? Like Mongo hit you with big rock simple.
Mongo.
It has to be very direct, and that's part of the game, right? Like you need to understand it, and you need to understand what's going to make you successful. If you need the skills because you don't have them, that's part of it. Like feed it in.
That's 3 culture. We got Beyonce, Gossip Girl, and Blazing Saddles references. That's a trifecta here.
Hey, as a soft CS gal, right? If your team does not have that skill set, and Drew has a really good company that could teach them that skill set pretty quickly. Just saying.
Yeah, for sure. I learned something in that conversation. Tennis, Todd? Really? I figured you'd be badminton or maybe pickleball, but not tennis. All right, so let's move on to the next. Thank you, John, for that question. Let's move on to the next question. All right, we've gotten through one question. Just to remind us,
and insults. That's what fuels us.
This is our energy, right? It's not what's in this cup. Although this is how I feel every morning when I get on Slack with Todd. It's this. By the way, just a reminder, we go until 1:15. So if you could stick around, you should, because we'll keep answering as many of these questions as possible. And who knows what other cultural references Todd's gonna drop here in the next 20 minutes. Matt asks, how do you see avoiding competition between sales and CS in order to protect against a battle for revenue between sales and CS so that each can be equally recognized for contributing to the company's bottom line. And Ty, looked like you want to jump in on this one first.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of answered it with my last one. That's why I moved to a spiff model.
Yeah. Okay.
For that very reason. Yeah.
Okay. Kristi, you got anything to add?
Yeah, like, I mean, we've done very creative things here where it's like, again, and I say it depends because it does depend on everything. But an organization, if your sales team has a decent lifetime in the organization, right? We see turnover very fast. So some of these models might not work, but we have had sales teams be compensated partially on successful onboardings, first time to milestones, certain things where, again, you're incentivized collectively to drive the right outcomes. When you incentivize towards the same objectives, you're driving unified behaviors and you're driving collaboration. Yes. When you incentivize competing objectives, that is where you have that competition, right? So like, how can you bring those teams together to incentivize the right behavior? And at the end of the day, can we stop making it about these teams? Make it about your customer. If you put the customer back at the design of the model, I promise you can't get it wrong.
Well said. Well said.
Yeah. One of our very early advisory clients, we actually helped them organize these pods that consisted of a account executive, a CSM, some analysts, a SE, a junior CSM, and they were responsible for both the acquisition and the retention. And we came up with a very, very creative compensation plan that was a sliding scale, for both the CSM as it was transitioned over, but the account executive was incented to bring in good fit customers and to help them make sure that they were getting to that point of value. And CS was there to help sales close those deals, bring in those good fit customers, and get them teed up, right, for success. And it was a great model. And these mini business units literally acted like mini business units, and the two senior people on the team, basically there was either a decision of one of them leading the team or they would co-lead the team. So somebody from success or somebody from sales could be responsible for that little business unit. And it really depended on their performance.
Also, do bonuses. Bonuses is such an easy way. If you just have a one revenue number at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, I don't care what it is. There's a revenue number your company has to hit, right? And that number is comprised of all of the pieces that make that up. New logo sales, growth, retention, churn, right? There is a formulaic way to build there. And guess what? Everybody plays a role in that mathematical equation. I'm not even a math girly. I'm not even good at math. And I can tell you that if you could figure that out and compensate on that end number and say, as a team, we hit this number, we all win. Here, everybody gets some money. It's like, I feel like there's simple things like that people lose sight of. Like you don't need to overcomplicate it with 30 different payment strategies and spiffs and all. I don't know, have one number. The company does. The CEO has a number. Pass that number down. Everybody.
So I don't know if you guys have ever done this. We do it. We do a company-wide bonus, right? Like literally every single person at the company is on that same bonus structure, right? So everyone from engineering to, support, everyone at the company, we have the same metrics around that. And if we hit those numbers, everyone hits those numbers. Has anyone done that before? Because I think
but not for the whole piece of compensation. It's a component of it.
Correct.
I've done that before. It's a component.
You still want commercially operating teams to still have that incentive if that's what they need, right? But yes, we have done it where we did it for quarterly. Another company I was at, we did an annual bonus. So if we hit the annual number. So the quarterly one obviously kept the momentum going, and it obviously ensured that we would eventually hit the bigger end of year target. But yes, it was a small component of it. So like if your total, OTE, your variable is 30%, maybe it was like 5% of that 30% or something like that.
I think it helps set the stage for us working as a team and us working together, right? Like all of us are a piece of that.
Well,
I like those company-wide bonuses.
Me too.
So the key thing to remember is company success is a team sport, right? Like, so basic principle. And when it comes to compensation, you incent the behavior that you want. Not everybody gets that. Not everybody actually lives it and breathes it, but ultimately, like, they believe that at the core of their being, that's what they're doing. So if you want to come up with a way to make it work, the easiest thing to do is to look at the existing model that sales is using and have a sit down with the CFO around why are we incenting them on this. Basically, what you want to do, not to go into too many details, but is pick it apart and understand what it is. And this is, as a leader, you should have access to do this so that you can tell the CFO, like the CFO, you need to make them your buddy because they're the only person in the company that the head of sales, that the CRO, that the CEO has to listen to, because you know what? They've got the purse string and the board listens to them. And if they say the CEO's got to go, it's probably going to happen. So make sure that you come up with something that the CFO buys into. And hell, I'll give you one more popular cultural reference.
Oh, gosh.
You ready for it?
I don't know.
Inception.
What is it?
It's all about Inception. It's all about making it their idea that this is the way that they're going to basically compensate you and the metrics. Because if they buy into it and if they've picked the metrics and you agree with it, shit's going to get done. And it's not going to be argued with.
Hey, Todd, I'm going to ask you a rhetorical-ish kind of question, but a question I still expect you to answer. What do you see as the number one reason why these CS leaders aren't befriending the CFO?
Oh, man.
Fear.
And it's not because he or she is a jerk. Why else may they not be befriending them?
No idea. I befriended my CFO all
How
the time.
about because they don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing when it comes to the numbers. They don't understand how the comp plans are made. They don't know how the revenue is calculated. They don't know the math. They don't understand it. And so because they are uneducated, they are scared to go into that conversation. What you should do is be vulnerable, play to their ego, lean in and ask them to teach you. Say, as part of my role in this organization, I know it is critical for me to do X. Please help me understand how that is done here. Especially if you're a new leader coming in, be vulnerable, lean into that, be educated. But I feel like a lot of people avoid conversations like that and relationships like that because they're uninformed. They're uneducated on that area. It's
Honestly,
not a safe space. I don't like math.
That last 45 seconds, can we clip that? Like that right there needs to be like, yeah, back of the room. Say it louder.
Hey, Ashley, let's clip that. Let's put it on TikTok.
The internet is so crazy.
Spot on, Kristi.
It's a lot about imposter syndrome. A lot of people feel that, that's a thing for them. And it's also a lot about not wanting to be vulnerable and explaining that you don't know what you don't know. And then,
but you weren't hired to be the CFO, right? So chief customer officer, VP of CS, director, whatever your title is, you were hired to do that work. It is okay for you to admit, I don't know how to do the CFO's job. I don't know how the revenue for this new company I joined 3 days ago. I don't know how your revenue is calculated. Show me the metrics. Help break it down. Spend some time with me.
Going back to the family dinner thing.
About this vulnerability.
I'm so vulnerable about vulnerability.
Going back to the kids table thing, right? Like CS is often kind of like the step kid at the kids table, right? Yeah. And we see a bunch of
redheaded stepchild at the kids table. Okay.
We see other departments come in and they just have these numbers and they know the right questions to ask, right? And we don't really see that in CS, and we don't so we're already disempowered walking into it, right? We don't have anyone else in leadership who's done it. Most of those folks come from sales, marketing, so we don't see it kind of demonstrated for us. And so it's a difficult situation. We're kind of
you can do if you're not willing to be vulnerable, go seek out a CFO at another company, ask them to help educate you on some things. You don't need the full model, but what do you need to know? What are the basics?
Yeah.
I don't know. I see CFO courses all the time online led by these former SaaS CEOs.
Kristi, I see
there's a little bit you can do to educate yourself.
My power in the boardroom during executive staff meetings completely changed when I buddied up with my CFO. And completely changed. My leverage, my influence completely changed. You need to be best friends with the CFO.
Well, and let me throw one out here for anybody that is in transition, they're looking to get a new job. So you get to hit the restart button, right? Like, so the one thing that I always did, it's going to sound hilarious, but I had 115 questions that I had for the interview process. And the thing that you've got to do is you've got to own that process. Don't be desperate. You need to make sure that the company is got their shit together. You do not want to get into a place where the company doesn't. So remember, you're interviewing them. Like, do I want to work here? And I had, of those questions, I had a big swath of them from the CFO. And if I didn't get an interview with the CFO, I was raising my hand going like, why am I not talking to them? Like, what are you hiding from me? What do I need to know? So, like, even if you're in place now, go and set up some time and have that conversation, get their beliefs about customer success surfaced so you know what you're working with, right? Like, because a lot of the things also come around to, and you see it in the most recent studies that are out, like CEOs, they are looking for what's the ROI. I put all this money into CS and I'm not seeing anything back, and our NRR is declining, and they don't understand the dynamics there. Well, like ultimately the counter to that is sit down with the CFO and have them run through the numbers and have them talk to the CEO, because they're going to hit on all the numbers that you don't have access to. And there's trust, there's data. Use that. Don't try and overcome that on your own. Like, you're never going to win. So I know there's a couple of things there, but like, it goes back to the CFO's got the numbers, they've got the purse string, they see all the data, they can help you.
100%. Thank you, Matt, for the question. Let's move on. Next question comes from Christina. Christina, thank you for being patient. Christina asks, what are some revenue opportunities you see CSM successfully owning? What metrics to use to back those up? Wow, this was upvoted quite a bit. I mean, it's
a good question.
Yeah. Well, what do you think? What do you think, Kristi?
I don't even know what the question's asking. So Todd, why don't you take this one to start?
Well, so I can put it into our parlance, right? So, I do a lot of the strategy for the company and the upsell and the way that we do things. And so, from our perspective, the revenue opportunities, you identify them by understanding what the audience needs, even if they don't know what they need. And so it comes back to, if for instance, you're buying something from me, one of the things that I'm looking at when you're doing your assessments and you're doing your exam scores is I'm looking at the skills that you're proficient and deficient in. And then when I do outreach, I'm looking at, hey, I see that you're deficient in X, Y, and Z. I attribute that to a certain stage in the life cycle. And I ask, are you seeing challenges? And I'll just throw one out there. Like, are you seeing challenges in onboarding? What do those look like? And it's all about, you need to know what potential things lead to a person buying this thing that you have. It doesn't really matter what the widget is. The formula is the same. Like, you have to establish a need for it. Otherwise, you're just pushing stuff. And that doesn't come from a place of, genuine care. You've got to care. That's what makes it authentic. And if you're looking at the things that they should care about because you know them, then you basically identify the revenue opportunities, but don't really look at them as revenue opportunities. Look at them as ways to solve the problems that the customer has.
You're selling solutions.
Well, and this is why customer success is in such a strong position, because you know the customer. They've already gotten value, hopefully, from your solution, right? And so you're not, like I said before, you're not trying to sell them on this new feature function based off of somebody else. You're trying to sell, it's based off of, hey, you've already gotten value out of us.
Well, and I would argue,
but so I feel like there is something to be said about what we are saying as the like utopian state versus everyone's reality. Like, let's be honest here.
Yeah.
For a lot of people that are, if you're a CSM and you have 100 customers, you don't know what's going on in every single one of these customers, but now you're being tasked to go sell them a new product that was just released 3 weeks ago. And for this quarter, here's your target. You have to close 80% of your customers have to buy this. Because of the design, the model breaks, right? I think that there are some, I won't say all.
Well, if you're expecting 80 upsells
Listen,
in a
listen,
book
what
of
did I say
business of
before?
100,
I'm not a
you're
math
doing
girl.
it right.
Can you back up off my numbers? This isn't about the numbers. This is about the principle of what I'm saying. My philosophy is not wrong. What I am saying is that by design, we are not setting these people up to be consultative in their selling motion. They are transactional in nature because of how the organization is forcing them into this.
Well, I would say if you're starting from scratch with this, right? Like you don't have anything. The first thing I would do is create a maturity model. Like this is the ultimate customer, right? They're, at least in my case, right? They're fully mature in both their asset and security posture, and they're starting with just asset, visibility, right? What does that maturity model look like? What products along the way map to those? At least from there, I can at least have, if you have 100 accounts, you can't talk to each one. So you at least have some trigger points to start with, right? I know they're here within the maturity model. I know I can have a conversation about where they want to go and what things I can plot in. Like that's like kind of the base place to start. Yes, Todd.
So
this is where this is a product that I bought for Todd based off of his maturity model. It's a candle. Okay. So there you go. All right. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Todd.
You just had to throw that one in there.
I did.
It's it doesn't relate to anything. But anyways, so Ty, I completely agree on the maturity model, but I'll say that I think that there's one thing in front of that. And I think that what a CSM really needs to understand, and damn well should, is what can your product do and how does it help? And so, if you don't have that as an atlas, as a map, then you're really screwed, right? Because you're just
those are table stakes. If you don't have that, why are you here, right?
Yeah,
like,
but a lot of people don't. Like I've talked to so many companies.
That's frightening to me.
That don't know.
That's scary.
It is.
But Ty, you also said you like to work in mature, late-stage, hyper-growth companies.
Yes,
By the time you get there, they are at a place of maturity. You're not seeing this dark demon that we're all dealing with down here. I'm telling you.
We have some very late-stage, multi-billion-dollar customers.
I have seen garbage up and down the spectrum here. But what I'm saying is that you definitely see it a lot more in less mature organizations that don't have the maturity, aren't as funded, right? Like they're struggling in different ways. So I would feel like you're not, like, for you to be shocked doesn't surprise me based on what you shared when you did your intro.
Totally fair. Yeah, so that does shock me though.
Here's the thing, right? Like, and clearly, like, this is something that I've been thinking about and I actually need to throw out there. And I guess I will now. I'll put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to put together a freaking prompt for people to go in and rip their website and try and figure out what the hell does my product do for Y customer and why is it a benefit to them? Because if you can't figure that damn part out, you are so screwed that I cannot even begin to put words to it. So
I did an exercise not too long ago with ChatGPT because we were talking about that.
I was just going to say, you could do some cool stuff with ChatGPT.
So I had to go to our website and a few competitors' websites. And I said, just list to me what the promises they make to customers are, right? Like, what are the promises we're making to customers? And can I go back to all of our product lines and have a realization of what all of those promises are? And can my competition, right? Like, that's a really good just first exercise to do.
I love you, Ty, and I'll do you one further.
He loves you.
I'll take it.
G2, any other site like Trust Radius, go in and look at what your customers are saying. And I'll tell you what, like, do a sentiment analysis and look at them as positive and negative, and start by throwing the positive ones away for the moment and look at all the negative ones and see, like, what can I learn from that? Like, what are they saying I can't deliver? And that's your broken promise, right? Like, and then flip to the other one, and I'm gonna end.
Wow, Kristi raised her hand. That's big. She has something important to say.
But then look at the delivered promises. And that is the addition to what Ty threw out there. And it's really about, like, if you are not day one given a manual that says you are selling ABC widget and it does 1, 2, 3 things for XYZ customer, then it's incumbent on you to learn how to use a customer value prop canvas and to do a little bit of work so that you rise to the top above your peers. But if you're a leader and you can't give that to your people, please, dear God, do so. Like, it is a game changer, because then you are not stuck with trying to figure out and get your team to try and figure out how to do it onesie twosie.
All right,
The
Kristi.
only thing I'm going to say here, Todd, is that while I love that idea, and I do love that idea, just remember the data is skewed. G2's revenue model is based on helping go and to facilitate to go find good reviews. And everyone incentivizes their customers to leave good reviews. You send out an NPS campaign and you get 9s and 10s. Guess what? You're gift carding those customers to go and leave reviews. So while I love that, please respect the fact that it is a broken model, that data is procured by companies to make the perception look better than it is. Now, of course, you will get some organic ones, but the majority of those are not organic. So please heed my
why
warning.
I say throw out the positives.
Throw out the, I mean, like,
Throw out the positives. And if you find somebody that does not have a sub, like, 4.8 rating, and
look at the volume of reviews too. Like,
and the volume,
listen,
right? Like,
let's go back to the Amazon model. If you're going to go buy a product and one product has 1 review and it's 5 stars, and the other one has 1 million reviews and it's 4 stars, I'm probably going to go buy the one that's the 4 stars with 1 million reviews over the one that's 5 stars with the 1 review. So just remember, it's the same thing as shopping. Just take all that into consideration. Take it with a grain of salt. I still love your recommendation though, Todd. I don't love you less.
Don't love me less, but
I won't love you less.
Okay, we got.
If you want the honest to God scoop, include Reddit in there. And
ooh, okay, I will 100% give you that. You want to know the truth about anything? Go to Reddit.
All right, and with that,
ugly truth. Yeah.
And with that, we've reached the end of today's session. We only got 3 questions answered. Why does that not surprise me with the 3 of you on this thing? So we've reached the end of our session. I want to thank our guests for sharing their valuable insights and experiences. Your contributions make these discussions truly meaningful for our community and for me as well. To our audience, thank you for your active participation. Share your thoughts about today's session on LinkedIn by tagging me, our guest, Success Hackers, Success Coaching. We'd love to hear your takeaways. Mark your calendars for our next CS Leadership Roundtable on March 12th, when we'll explore our first of multiple support-related topics. We're getting in the support business on how to ensure that customer support teams can align their goals with the broader customer journey to drive retention and satisfaction. Finally, let me leave you with this. Great CS leaders know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to find them. And that's why we created this series. Have a great rest of your day and month, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everyone.